Very little room to work with. He's going to have to go for the big spinner. And that is as good as he could possibly do from there.
Just saw that ball try to grab on that position.
Might be a
Yeah,
combination.
I would think the second, yeah.
Yeah, ooh, man, slams it in there. But there's that temper again.
Bethpage Black was supposed to be golf's biggest stage, a cathedral of competition where legends rise and rivalries burn. But instead of glory, it turned into chaos. Brawls, beer, and backlash drowned out the game itself. And by the time Europe lifted the trophy, the question wasn't who won, but what just happened to golf. Fans crossed the line, tempers exploded, and in the middle of it all stood the world's #1, Scottie Scheffler, broken, honest, and suddenly human. This wasn't just a loss, it was a meltdown caught in real time, and the confession he made afterward left golf rattled to its core. So how did a celebration of teamwork spiral into the sport's biggest embarrassment? And what did Scheffler admit that has everyone talking about the future of golf? Let's break it down, because what unfolded at Bethpage Black didn't just change the scoreboard, it changed golf itself. From the very first swing, Bethpage Black didn't sound like golf, it sounded like war. The crowd roared like they were at a boxing match, not a fairway.
It's like, why are you cooking yourself?
Well, so like when you make raviolis, we wanted to make them from scratch, and so you like roll the dough and you got to cut the dough. But we were at a rental house, so we didn't have the right tools, and the only thing there was a wine glass that we found.
Flags waved, beer cups clinked, chants echoed across the course. The atmosphere was electric, heavy, and volatile. But inside that storm, Team Europe looked untouchable. Luke Donald's players moved with eerie calm, their eyes fixed, their expressions blank. They didn't respond to the noise, they let it roll off like rain on steel. While the Americans fed on adrenaline, Europe fed on silence. Every swing, every read, every putt looked calculated, as if they had already rehearsed the chaos. Luke Donald's plan was ruthless in its simplicity. Precision beats passion. He paired experience with youth, control with fire. McIlroy led the charge, his smile sharp as glass. Victor Hovland followed with quiet ferocity, draining impossible putts as if they were routine. The crowd booed, cursed, chanted, and Europe just smiled. The more toxic it became, the more focused they grew. By Friday afternoon, the Americans looked rattled. Keegan Bradley tried to pump his players up, shouting, pacing, forcing smiles, but the scoreboard told the truth. Europe was dismantling them. By Saturday morning, that truth turned brutal. 11.5 to 4, the kind of lead that doesn't just hurt, it humiliates.
Yeah, I just say it's pretty much as simple as that. Kermit's a guy that works hard, he does his prep work, and he was an easy guy for me to trust out there. And I felt like we did a good job of talking through our shots and staying patient and keep doing the right things. Even when things were looking a little bit squirrely there on the back nine, we did a good job of staying focused.
The home crowd, once thunderous, now sounded fractured. Cheers warped into grumbles. Sarcasm replaced spirit. Even the players could feel the air thickening with resentment. Fans who came to celebrate were now venting frustration. Some hurled insults, others just sat in silence. And yet, amid that growing hostility, Europe thrived. They were methodical, almost emotionless, grinding through each hole with mechanical efficiency. Every putt that dropped was another nail in America's pride. Every mistake from the US was met with that same quiet smirk from McIlroy. Not arrogance, but control. By dusk, the chants had turned to mutters, and the once celebratory roar of Bethpage had become something darker. The storm was brewing, and golf's clean, gentlemanly image was about to be tested like never before. By Saturday morning, Team USA looked like a machine with its gears grinding against each other. The scoreboard didn't just show defeat, it showed disconnection. Every player wore the same haunted expression, tight smiles, blank stares, forced focus.
This guy, Scottie Scheffler, is very popular and very successful in his accomplishments. And then you win and you're like, yay! He really talked about how winning's great, but it's really not that great.
The world's #1, Scottie Scheffler, who was supposed to be the anchor, suddenly looked adrift. His swing still looked textbook perfect, but the rhythm was gone. Each missed putt felt heavier than the last, echoing through the silence that followed. Cameras caught it all, the hesitation before the swing, the disbelief after the miss, the quiet mutter of frustration under his breath. Scheffler wasn't melting down outwardly, but the cracks were clear to anyone paying attention. Keegan Bradley tried to rally his players, clapping, pacing, whispering encouragements that felt more desperate than confident. The chemistry that had defined their last victory was gone. Players looked like strangers sharing the same uniform. Brooks Koepka muttered something after a short miss, and the look Scheffler gave him said everything. Blame, regret, exhaustion. Analysts later replayed that clip 100 times, zooming in on body language, searching for signs of collapse. The narrative was shifting fast. This wasn't Europe dominating anymore. This was America imploding, and the pressure was merciless.
At the end of the day, it's like, I'm not out here to inspire the next generation of golfers. I'm not here to inspire somebody else to be the best player in the world, because what's the point? You know, this is not a fulfilling life.
Every camera lens, every fan chant, every online comment added another brick to the mental weight pressing on their shoulders. Social media turned each misstep into a meme before the hole even ended. Team tension trended worldwide. Suddenly, this wasn't just a golf tournament, it was a psychological experiment in real time, testing who could survive public unraveling. Meanwhile, Europe thrived in the discomfort. They played tighter, sharper, colder. Every American error fueled their rhythm. Rory's grin grew wider with each victory, and Viktor Hovland's calm precision became a weapon. The US crowd, sensing collapse, grew louder, but not to cheer. The cheers morphed into taunts, then into open hostility. Scheffler's jaw tightened with every heckle. The pressure wasn't coming from Europe anymore, it was coming from his own people. By the end of the day, one truth was clear: Team USA wasn't just losing the Ryder Cup, they were losing themselves. By Saturday afternoon, Bethpage Black no longer felt like a golf tournament. It felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. What started as playful patriotism twisted into something unrecognizable. The crowd's roar turned jagged, chants slurred into insults, cheers curdled into curses. It wasn't golf decorum anymore. It was mob energy disguised as enthusiasm.
Rory, with all that in mind, everything you go through, how satisfying is it to turn around to someone and say, quote, "Shut the F up," and then stiff it to 2 feet?
Very satisfying.
Rory McIlroy flinched mid-swing as a wave of jeers rolled down the fairway. Caddies were booed for simply walking past. And then came the moment that changed everything. The event's own MC grabbed a microphone and led a vulgar chant directed at McIlroy, a move so outrageous she was forced to resign before the final round. Social media erupted instantly. Phone cameras captured every ugly second. The chants, the boos, the taunts, and within hours, TikTok and X were flooded with clips captioned "Bethpage Black gone wild." Sports networks looped the footage like evidence at a trial. Commentators debated whether this was passion or poison. The consensus was brutal. Golf's most prestigious team event had lost control of its own crowd. Even American fans began to cringe. You could see it in the stands, people shaking their heads, embarrassed. "This isn't who we are," one man muttered as another hurled a beer into the air. But the tone had already shifted beyond saving. It wasn't about cheering anymore, it was about dominance. The noise became a weapon, and the players were targets. Luke Donald called the behavior ugly. Tom Watson publicly apologized, saying he was ashamed. By then though, it didn't matter. Every headline screamed scandal, every replay made the sport look smaller. Bethpage Black had turned from a course into a courtroom, and golf was on trial for its own soul. The question wasn't who would win, it was whether the Ryder Cup would ever recover from what came next. By Sunday morning, Bethpage Black was buzzing with nervous energy. The air felt thick, heavy, like everyone knew something was about to give. Team USA trailed badly, but hope clung to the crowd like humidity. The chants began early, desperate and defiant. USA, USA. Scottie Scheffler stood on the first tee, jaw tight, eyes distant. The #1 golfer in the world looked like he was fighting ghosts. His drive still soared, but his putter betrayed him. Every missed opportunity chipped away at his composure, and each time the camera found his face, it told the same story: a man searching for rhythm in a game that suddenly felt foreign. The Americans tried to feed off the noise, but the noise wasn't support anymore, it was pressure. The cheers sounded like demands, every miss drew groans, every mistake magnified by thousands of eyes desperate for redemption. Keegan Bradley clapped, shouted, tried to will his team into belief, but the energy felt hollow. Across the fairway, Europe marched with quiet defiance. Rory McIlroy silenced the crowd with a laser-straight drive, and Viktor Hovland followed with another perfect iron. Each European birdie felt like a statement. Calm always beats chaos. Then came the flicker, a few matches turning red on the board, whispers that maybe, just maybe, the impossible comeback had begun. The stands shook with chants, the smell of beer and adrenaline filled the air. Scheffler drained a long putt, and for the first time all weekend he smiled. But the moment didn't last. On the 15th hole, as McIlroy walked off with Erica by his side, a beer cup flew from the crowd, splashing near her feet. Gasps cut through the noise. Cameras caught the shock in Rory's eyes as he stopped, turned, and checked if she was okay.
149 to the hole. Probably got a carry that's about 143.
Amazing get a get which
Oh
that
my goodness, wow.
The clip went viral within minutes, slow-motion replays looping worldwide. It was the moment everything changed. The cheers died, replaced by stunned silence. What was supposed to be golf's proudest event had turned into something darker, a snapshot of a sport losing its restraint. Bethpage hadn't just hosted a meltdown, it had televised one. By Sunday night, golf's proudest tournament had turned into its biggest crisis. The images flooding the internet weren't of birdies or trophies, they were of chaos. Clips of flying beer, booing crowds, and McIlroy's stunned reactions spread across every feed, each replay more damning than the last. The moment Europe lifted the Ryder Cup should have been a coronation, but instead it felt like a funeral for golf's dignity. Headlines didn't read Europe triumphs, they read golf loses control. The Guardian called it a disgrace, ESPN called it a meltdown, and social media branded it Bethpage disgrace. Former legends rushed to distance themselves. Tom Watson publicly apologized on behalf of American fans, calling their behavior shameful. Commentators like Brandel Chambly described it as the ugliest crowd in modern golf. Even players from Team USA admitted the atmosphere had gone too far. The event's organizers scrambled to contain the PR disaster, promising security reviews, alcohol policy assessments, and crowd conduct reforms. But every statement sounded like damage control. The fire was already raging, and no amount of corporate apology could extinguish it. Sponsors made quiet phone calls behind the scenes, worried about brand reputation. Some even hinted at pulling future support if the Ryder Cup couldn't restore order. Analysts debated whether the PGA had created a monster, a tournament so fueled by nationalism and alcohol that it was now indistinguishable from a football riot. The contrast between the two teams became symbolic. Europe celebrated with class and champagne, while America drowned in booze and shame. By Monday morning, the Ryder Cup wasn't just trending in sports, it was trending everywhere. Talk shows dissected the beer throw incident like a political scandal. Memes mocked the crowd. Influencers posted reaction videos titled "Golf's Most Embarrassing Day." The damage was irreversible. What was once golf's crown jewel had become its cautionary tale. And at the center of the wreckage stood one man, Scottie Scheffler, whose next words would decide how the world remembered this moment.
Life, it's fulfilling from the sense of accomplishment, but it's not fulfilling from a sense of like the deepest, places of your heart. There's a lot of people that make it to what they thought was going to fulfill them in life, and then you get there and all of a sudden you get to #1 in the world, and then they're like, what's the point?
When Scottie Scheffler finally stepped up to the microphone, the chaos faded into silence. The roar that had haunted Bethpage all weekend evaporated, replaced by the low hum of cameras and the shuffle of reporters bracing for sound bites. But what they got wasn't spin, it was sincerity. He didn't hide behind cliches or excuses. His voice was calm but fragile, every word forced through the weight of defeat. "I let my teammates down," he said softly. "I let myself down. No drama, no script, just raw honesty." The #1 golfer in the world suddenly looked human, stripped of the armor that fame builds. Reporters froze. Even the broadcast booth went quiet. You could almost feel the collective exhale of a sport realizing it was witnessing something rare: vulnerability. Scheffler wasn't blaming the course, the conditions, or the crowd. He was blaming himself. And that kind of truth, unfiltered and painful, cut through the noise louder than any cheer that weekend. He kept talking, almost in disbelief at his own emotions. "You train your whole life for moments like this," he said, eyes lowered. "And when they don't go your way, it hurts in ways you can't explain." Those words hit harder than any highlight reel. They revealed what pressure really does, not to swing mechanics, but to the soul. Fans flooded social media, torn between admiration and discomfort. Some praised his humility, others said he looked broken, but everyone agreed on one thing: it was real. Analysts dissected the statement for days. Was it a turning point, or a crack in golf's strongest mind? Could a player so dominant individually ever thrive in a team format where emotion mattered more than precision? No one had answers. What they did have was respect. Because in a sport obsessed with perfection, Scheffler dared to show imperfection. That confession transcended golf. It spoke to every athlete, every competitor who'd ever failed under the lights. It was a reminder that greatness isn't measured by trophies, but by the courage to face your own collapse and keep standing. In the days that followed, golf found itself staring into a mirror it didn't want to face. Bethpage Black wasn't just a tournament gone wrong. It was a warning sign flashing in neon. What the world saw that weekend wasn't passion, it was obsession. Pride had curdled into hostility, and the sport that once prided itself on silence and etiquette had been swallowed by noise and nationalism. The images replayed endlessly: jeering fans, flying beer, security stepping in, and a broken champion under the glare of the spotlight. For many, it felt like golf's soul had cracked right alongside Team USA. The debate raged across talk shows and social media. Was the problem alcohol, pressure, or the slow drift of golf towards spectacle over sport? Commentators called it an identity crisis, a gentleman's game struggling to survive in an era that rewards chaos. The PGA's polished statements promised reviews, reforms, and new crowd policies, but they sounded like echoes in a hollow room. Sponsors whispered about brand safety. Veterans quietly asked if the next Ryder Cup could ever reclaim the grace of the past. Europe, meanwhile, celebrated, but even their smiles carried unease. They had won, yes, but what exactly had they inherited? Champagne flowed, cameras flashed, and yet every cheer seemed tinged with guilt. And amid that contradiction, Scheffler's quiet confession began to grow. His honesty became the one thing everyone could agree on. Fans replayed his words, and saw not weakness, but courage, the kind of truth sports rarely allow. In defeat, he had done what no victory could, expose the human core behind the superstar. As days passed, one question refused to fade. What kind of sport does golf want to be? Can it balance passion and respect, chaos and calm? Bethpage Black had exposed the cracks. The next Ryder Cup, and the next generation, would decide whether golf could heal from them. Months later, the echoes of Bethpage still lingered. But something subtle had shifted. The chaos had burned away, leaving a strange calm, like the air after a storm. Scottie Scheffler, once the face of that weekend's heartbreak, re-emerged not as the fallen favorite, but as its most compelling survivor. His humility became a rallying cry. In interviews, he didn't dodge the past, he dissected it. "Pressure reveals who you really are," he said in one sit-down, his tone steady. "Sometimes you have to lose yourself to learn what matters." Those words hit harder than any drive off the tee. Across the golf world, others began to echo that mindset. Coaches talked about mental health. Players spoke about crowd conduct and respect. The PGA rolled out new guidelines, smaller alcohol zones, stricter fan ejections, better security briefings. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for the first time in years, the conversation around golf wasn't about who could hit the farthest, but who could handle the weight of expectation with grace. Europe's victory stood untouched in the record books, but the real story had evolved. Bethpage Black had become a case study in pressure, pride, and redemption. Highlight reels no longer ended with beer cups flying. They ended with Scheffler's quiet words replayed over slow-motion footage, a symbol of resilience rather than ruin. When asked what he'd learned most from that weekend, Scheffler paused before answering. "That golf doesn't define you," he said. "Character does." It was simple, but it carried the gravity of someone who had lived through chaos and come out clearer on the other side. As the next Ryder Cup looms on the horizon, the question isn't whether golf can recover, it's whether it can evolve. Because legends aren't made in victory, they're forged in fallout. Bethpage Black will forever be remembered for its noise, its backlash, and its breaking point, but also for the moment when the sport rediscovered its soul through one man's honesty. And maybe, just maybe, that's how golf finds its future.